Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to help you drift into deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I never really understood why my mom hated Halloween. As a kid, I thought it was just one of those mom things, like how she'd unplug the TV when it thundered or refused to watch horror movies. She'd let us celebrate, sure, but she never took part. No decorations, no costumes, no candy bowls by the door. Just the same quiet warning every year. Be careful. When October rolled around, Dad took me and my little sister trick-or-treating while Mom stayed home. Curtains half drawn, lights dimmed, like she was hiding from something. I used to think she just didn't like fun. That changed in 2020. That night it was just the two of us. Me home from college, her drying dishes while I poured another glass of cheap wine. She got quiet, the heavy kind of quiet that makes the air feel thick. "You know why I don't like Halloween, right?" she asked. I laughed. "Because you're a buzzkill?" She didn't smile. "Sit down." She told me about 1977 when she was 9, living in a little Wisconsin town called Clearbrook, the kind of place where kids rode bikes until dark and doors stayed unlocked. That Halloween, she and her two siblings dressed up as Disney characters. Her dad took a Polaroid before they left, Minnie, Mickey, and Daisy Duck smiling at the camera. She said it was the happiest night of her life. They hit every house on the block except one, the old brick house at the end of Maple Drive. Everyone avoided it. Mom said it felt wrong. But her little brother Eli begged, "Come on, I want more candy." Their dad sighed and agreed. One last house, then home. The porch light flickered as they walked up the cracked driveway. When the door opened, it wasn't an old man like she expected. It was someone else. Tall, broad-shouldered, bald. His eyes were empty. He didn't speak, just reached into a bowl and dropped something into each of their buckets. Her dad thanked him politely, but the man just stood there, smiling faintly like he knew something they didn't. Halfway down the street, they met up with the neighbor kids, Tommy, Heather, and Dale. Tommy had already started eating his candy. He pulled out one wrapped in shiny red foil, unwrapped it, popped it in his mouth, and then he stopped walking. His smile vanished. He started coughing, a dry, tearing sound. Then he spat out something thick and dark. Blood. Her dad ran to him, shouting for help, but within seconds, Tommy was convulsing. Heather began to choke next, then Eli. Mom said she still remembers the warmth of her brother's blood on her hands as he collapsed against her, gasping, crying, not understanding what was happening. The street filled with flashing lights. Tommy and Heather died that night. Eli barely survived. His tongue and throat were shredded from the inside. Police raided the man's house. What they found made even seasoned officers sick. Jars filled with metal shards, a work table covered in razor blades, a bowl of sugar and wax for resealing wrappers. When they arrested him, he didn't resist. He just laughed, a low, broken laugh that echoed down the block. "They wanted a treat," he said. "I gave them one." Mom's voice trembled as she finished the story. "You've met your Uncle Eli," she said. "He still can't say certain words. That's why then," she whispered, "I still see that man's smile in my dreams. Every Halloween since, she turns off the lights and locks the doors. Not because she thinks it'll happen again, but because she remembers how it felt." A few weeks later, I went to visit her on Halloween night. The house was dark, quiet. When I asked if she was okay, she said something that made my skin crawl. "That house, the one on Maple Drive, burned down years ago," she murmured. "But sometimes I still see it in my dreams. The porch light flickers, and then he's always there waiting with that bowl." That night when I drove home, I noticed something on the pavement near my car. A single piece of candy in a shiny red wrapper. I told myself it was nothing, just some kid's drop. But under the streetlight, the foil gleamed too bright. I didn't touch it. I just went inside, locked the door twice, and lay awake, thinking about how sometimes the scariest stories aren't made up. They're just the ones your mother finally finds the courage to tell. I always thought autumn in our little town of Maple Hollow had a kind of magic to it. The kind that makes you forget the world ever had sharp edges. The air always smelled faintly of wood smoke. The trees glowed red and gold along the ridgeline, and every porch seemed to have a pumpkin smiling in the twilight. For the last 4 years, my girlfriend Lindsay and I had a small tradition. We didn't throw big parties or go to haunted houses. Instead, every October, we'd visit a pumpkin patch, carve a couple together, and spend the night watching horror movies with cheap wine and too many candles. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Lindsay loved everything about fall: the scarves, the cider, the cinnamon candles. She'd start decorating by the first week of October. I went along with it because, well, seeing her happy made it feel like something worth doing. Last year, she found a new place online. "Let's try this one," she said, showing me a picture on her phone, a small pumpkin farm just outside of town called Hollow Creek Pumpkins. The photo showed a red barn surrounded by fields, a wooden sign that read, "Family grown since 1971. I'd seen that sign before driving past the old county road, but the place always looked kind of run down. "You sure it's open?" I asked. She grinned. "Yep, says open till 7 o'clock. We'll go Thursday." That Thursday evening, we left just before sunset. The drive out there took about 20 minutes, the road narrowing into long stretches of cracked asphalt lined with trees that seemed to lean closer the farther we went. By the time we turned down the gravel lane marked Hollow Creek, the sun had almost disappeared. The air had that heavy, damp chill that clings to your clothes. Only a few lights hung along the entrance, bulbs strung between wooden poles flickering every few seconds. "Guess we're the last ones here," Lindsay said, looking around the empty lot. Beyond the fence, the field stretched out in neat rows, orange shapes glowing faintly under the dim sky. Near the barn, a man stepped out, tall, thin, in a flannel shirt and muddy boots. His face was lined in a way that could have looked kindly in daylight, but under that flickering light it just seemed tired. "Evening, folks," he said, voice deep but friendly. "You're welcome to take your time, but we'll be closing soon. My wife's inside if you want cider or a sack for your pumpkins." "Thanks," Lindsay said brightly, and we walked past the fence into the field. It was quiet, unnaturally quiet. No music, no chatter, not even the faint hum of a generator. Just the sound of wind moving through dry corn stalks and the soft squelch of mud under our boots. Rows of pumpkins stretched in every direction, their vines snaking through the soil like veins. Most were half buried in damp earth. "Too small," Lindsay said, crouching to brush off one near her feet. "We need one with a flat face for carving." I smirked. "You're always picky. Just grab one before it gets dark." She stuck her tongue out. "I want the perfect pumpkin, thank you very much." So we wandered farther into the field, the barn lights growing smaller behind us. The pumpkins here looked better, big, smooth, untouched. Maybe no one wanted to walk this far. After a while, Lindsay gasped, "Look at that one!" Near the edge of the woods sat a large pumpkin, nearly flawless, its surface glowing orange in the last bit of daylight. She jogged ahead, crouched down, and brushed off the dirt. "Perfect," she said, grinning. I was about to tease her when I noticed movement in the trees, a flash of something pale between the trunks. It could have been light, could have been someone watching. "You see that?" I asked. She looked up, frowning. "See what?" "Someone in the woods, I think, maybe the owner checking the fence, but when I looked again, the space between the trees was empty." We decided to head back. The air had turned colder, the sky now a deep violet. The barn looked smaller and darker than before, like it had sunk into the shadows. Halfway there, Lindsay froze. "What?" I asked. She pointed toward the tree line. 2 figures stood there. At first I thought it was the old couple, the man and his wife. but something about them looked wrong. They weren't moving, not swaying in the wind, not shifting their weight, just still. The man's plaid shirt was the same, and the woman's long cardigan hung loosely, but their faces were half hidden in the dark. The whites of their eyes caught the last sliver of light like glass marbles. Hello?" I called. They didn't answer. "Who are you talking to?" Lindsay whispered. I nodded toward them. "Them." Over there, she turned, and they stepped behind the trees. Not like they were walking, but like they were withdrawing into shadow smoothly and too fast. Lindsay grabbed my arm. "Let's go." We didn't talk much on the way back. The barn door was now shut, the lights nearly gone. The open sign had been flipped to closed. "Guess they went inside," I muttered. We left $10 under a rock on the counter, the price scribbled faintly on the chalkboard, and hurried to the car. The gravel lot was empty now. No truck, no people, only our car sitting under one of those buzzing lights that kept flickering like it was trying to die. As we got in, Lindsay kept glancing back at the field. "You think they live here?" she asked. "Probably. Old folks like that usually do." I started the engine, and as the headlights swept across the barn, I saw someone standing by the door, just for a second, a tall, still shape. When I blinked, it was gone. "Let's just go," Lindsay whispered. That night, we carved the pumpkins like always. We tried to laugh about it, pretend it was just nerves. But neither of us could shake the feeling that something had been off about those people. "They just gave me the creeps," Lindsay said. "Maybe we'll try a different patch next year." I agreed, but the feeling didn't fade. A week later, I was driving home from a late shift. It was almost 9, the road nearly deserted, mist curling off the fields. And that's when I saw him, walking along the shoulder. An old man in a plaid shirt. He didn't look up as I passed, didn't react to the headlights, just walked stiffly toward town. I slowed, thought about stopping, but something deep in my gut screamed no. When I looked in the rearview mirror, he was gone. Completely. On Halloween night, Lindsay and I carved again, trying to reclaim some normalcy. We set the finished pumpkins on the porch, hers with a wide, cheerful grin, mine with simple triangle eyes. "See?" she said. "Totally worth it." I smiled, but then I looked across the street. 2 silhouettes stood by the tree line, a man and a woman. "Linz," I said quietly, "go inside." "What? Why?" "Just go." She followed my gaze and froze. The figures didn't move, didn't wave, just stared. Then in the blink of an eye, they were gone. We didn't sleep that night. Every creak, every gust of wind made us jump. Around 2 a.m., I heard soft crunches outside, footsteps on gravel. I got up, went to the window. Nothing. But when I opened the door to blow out the candles inside our pumpkins, both had been moved. Not far, just a few inches. Enough that the wax had scraped across the railing, and both candles were out. The next morning, I drove back to Hollow Creek. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that we must have imagined things. But when we arrived, my stomach dropped. The entire place was deserted. No pumpkins, no barn lights, no crates, nothing. Just dry dirt and a sagging sign that read Hollow Creek Pumpkins. An old man in a pickup truck slowed down as he saw us standing there. "Y'all looking for the Harlans?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "They run this place, right?" He frowned. "They used to. But their house burned down a few years ago. Back in 2019, I think. Killed them both. Nobody's been out here since Lindsay went pale." "Are you sure?" "Sure as I can be," the man said. "Whole field's been empty since. Kinda spooky, ain't it?" He drove off, leaving us standing in the silence. I turned back toward the field one last time, and that's when I saw them, far out by the trees. 2 figures, side by side, smiling. That night, when I lit our pumpkins again, the flames flickered weakly. The carvings looked different in the shadows, and less like smiles, more like open mouths. And somewhere outside, faint and distant, I swear I heard laughter. Not loud, not playful. Just a dry, brittle sound drifting through the dark, like the whisper of leaves scraping against an empty field. When I was 15, my uncle hired me to help on his farm just outside town, mostly feeding animals and cleaning up after harvest. I didn't mind. It was quiet work and the money was decent. But there was one part of his land nobody touched. The pumpkin patch. It sat behind a crooked wooden fence half hidden by overgrown vines. Every October it seemed to come alive, orange shapes swelling from the earth, twisting on their stems like they were breathing. Uncle Ray never let me near it. "That part grows on its own," he'd say with a voice that didn't sound like him. "You leave it be." I thought it was weird. Pumpkins don't grow by themselves. Somebody has to plant them, right? One afternoon, about a week before Halloween, I was hauling hay when I saw him out there. Uncle Ray standing in the patch, staring at the ground. From where I stood, it looked like he was talking to someone, whispering, nodding slowly. But there was no one else around, just him and those pumpkins. When he saw me watching, he shouted, "Get back to the barn!" I'd never heard him yell like that before. His face was pale, eyes wide, like a man who'd seen a ghost. That night at dinner, he barely touched his food. I asked who he'd been talking to. He froze, fork halfway to his mouth, and said quietly, "Sometimes the soil remembers things better than we do." A few days later, the county fair announced its annual pumpkin contest. Biggest pumpkin wins $500. I needed the money. So that night, when my uncle went to bed, I grabbed a flashlight and hopped the fence. The air changed the second I crossed. Heavier, colder. The vines seemed to shift in the dark, curling toward the light like fingers reaching for warmth. I picked one of the biggest pumpkins I could find. It was pale orange, almost white, and slick to the touch, like skin that hadn't seen sun. When I tapped it, it made a dull, wet sound. Still, I hoisted it up and carried it to the shed. That's when I noticed something strange. The stem was still moving, not swaying, pulsing. The next morning, I woke to the smell of rot. The pumpkin sat on the porch, split open down the side. Inside, instead of seeds, there was hair, human hair. I screamed and stumbled back. Uncle Ray came running, saw it, and his face went gray. He didn't ask what I'd done, didn't yell, just whispered, "You shouldn't have taken it." Then he buried the pumpkin himself, deep behind the barn, whispering words I didn't understand. That night I couldn't sleep. From my window I saw him walking back to the patch again, carrying a lantern. The light flickered across dozens of shapes, not pumpkins. Heads, round, orange, swollen shapes that looked too much like faces. Their mouths were open and their eyes, small black pits, seemed to follow him as he passed. By Halloween night, Uncle Ray had stopped eating altogether. He said they were hungry. He said he'd been feeding them for years. When I asked what they were, he told me the story like a confession. Long time ago, he said, before I bought this land, there was a family here, the Dawsons. Wife, husband, 3 kids. They went missing one Halloween. Town searched for weeks, never found them. But every October, the ground back there started blooming on its own. No seeds, no rain, no reason. He rubbed his hands together, trembling. First time I cut one open, there was an eye inside. A child's eye. I laughed or tried to, hundreds. But his face was dead serious. He whispered, "This land grows what it's owed." That night, he told me to leave. "Go stay with your mom. Don't come back till November." I did what he said. But curiosity killed the sense in me. On Halloween night, I drove back. The moon was low and orange, same color as the patch. From the road, I saw movement. My uncle standing among the pumpkins again, whispering, hands trembling. Then I saw them rise, shapes pushing up from the soil. Small ones first, then larger, like people dragging themselves out of graves. Their skin was pale and veined, their eyes glowing faintly orange from the lantern light. They weren't walking toward him, they were growing around him, vines wrapping his legs, pulling him down. He didn't fight, didn't scream, just said, "They're family now." Then the earth swallowed him whole. When the sheriff came the next day, the patch was empty. No pumpkins, no footprints, just dark soil and one thing sitting in the center. A single pumpkin, pale white, slick with dew. Carved into it in rough, jagged letters was my name. Every Halloween since, I get a package on my doorstep. No return address. Inside, a small pumpkin, pale, almost white, and a single human tooth sealed inside. I haven't opened this year's yet, but I can smell it from across the room. Sweet, rotten, alive. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind blows just right, I swear I can hear it whisper my name through the walls. Every small town has that one Halloween store that only seems to exist in October. You never see anyone setting it up, never see anyone taking it down. It just appears. In my town, that place was Hollow's End Costumes, a faded 2-story building with a crooked sign and paper ghosts taped to the dusty windows. I walked by it every year on my way to school, but I'd never gone inside. Until the year I turned 16. It was 2 days before Halloween. My friends were planning a big costume party, and I still hadn't picked anything to wear. Spirit Halloween was sold out of everything decent, and Goodwill just smelled like sadness and sweat. So I went to Hollow's End. When I opened the door, a little bell tinkled. Not cheerful exactly, but off-key, like a note played too long on an old piano. The air inside was heavy, thick with the scent of mothballs and something else. Something metallic. The lighting was dim, just a few flickering bulbs strung along the ceiling. Racks of costumes filled the room, but they didn't look new. They looked used. Faded clown suits, dusty vampire cloaks, blood-stained nurse outfits. I thought the stains were fake. "Can I help you?" A voice rasped from the shadows. I jumped. A tall man stepped out from behind the counter. He wore a moth-eaten suit that looked older than the building itself, and his skin had a strange waxy sheen, like a mannequin that had learned to move. His eyes were glassy but alive, too alive. "Just looking," I stammered. He smiled. "Everything here looks back." I thought I'd misheard him, but then he motioned me toward a rack in the back corner. "Costumes choose their owners," he said softly. "Try one on. You'll know when it fits." The rack was filled with costumes that didn't make sense. A tattered firefighter's coat, a cracked porcelain mask, a wedding dress streaked with something dark. And one in the middle, a simple black cloak. It looked normal, almost elegant compared to the rest. I pulled it off the rack and immediately felt something. Not warmth. Weight. The fabric seemed to hum faintly, like it was breathing. In the fitting room, I slipped it on. It was cold, and so cold it made my teeth ache. But when I looked in the mirror, something was wrong. The reflection wasn't quite right. The lights flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw something standing behind me. Tall, thin, face covered by a black mask. Then the light steadied, and it was gone. Except my reflection smiled. I didn't. I tore off the cloak, shoved it under my arm, and rushed to the counter. "How much?" I asked, trying not to sound freaked out. The shopkeeper tilted his head, eyes unblinking. "For you," he said. "It's already been paid." Before I could respond, he leaned closer. His breath smelled like rust and old earth. "Just make sure you return it by midnight on Halloween," he whispered. "Otherwise, it keeps you." That night I wore it to the party anyway. Everyone said it looked perfect, like it was made for me. I felt powerful, almost invisible in the dark. But as the night went on, things started to feel off. People would look at me and flinch. One guy swore I whispered his name even though I hadn't spoken. Another said he saw my reflection move before I did. When I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror, my eyes were black. Not contacts, not lighting. Just black. And the cloak wouldn't come off. I clawed at it until my fingers bled, but the fabric clung tighter, pulsing against my skin. It felt alive. It was alive. The room went cold, and in the mirror I saw them. Dozens of faces flickering behind me, mouths open in silent screams. Some of them were familiar. I realized where I'd seen them before, on the missing posters taped to the grocery store window. each one wearing a Hollow's End costume. The reflection whispered in the same voice as the shopkeeper. They didn't return them either. I blacked out. When I woke up, it was morning. The cloak was gone. I thought it had all been a nightmare until I checked my phone. There were dozens of photos I didn't take. Photos of me standing in the mirror, smiling. And in the last one, taken at 11:59 p.m., the cloak was back. And someone stood behind me in the dark. The shopkeeper. I ran back to Hollow's End the next day, but the store wasn't there. Just an empty lot covered in dead leaves. Where the counter should have been, there was a single mannequin, dressed in my black cloak. Its hands were real. My hands. It's been 3 years since then. Every Halloween, the shop returns, never in the same place. And each time I see that same cloak in the window waiting. Sometimes it moves just slightly, like it's breathing. Last night I woke up to the sound of my closet door creaking open, and in the darkness I saw it hanging there, the same cloak swaying gently, whispering my name. They say every town has its secrets. In mine, it's the parade that no one talks about. It's not the one you see downtown with floats and music. This one happens in the fields, past the old cemetery after midnight. No one's supposed to watch it. No one's supposed to even know it exists. But when I was 17, I saw it, and I've been seeing it ever since. It started with a dare. My best friend Tyler had heard the story from his older brother, that every Halloween at midnight, people dressed in masks marched through the fields near Black Hollow Road. If you stayed long enough, they'd invite you to join. If you refused, you'd never wake up again. It sounded like urban legend nonsense, but we were dumb teenagers who thought fear was funny. So we packed flashlights, snuck out, and biked down to the edge of the woods just before midnight. The night was quiet, too quiet. Even the crickets had gone silent. Fog rolled across the fields in slow, heavy waves, and then we heard it, a distant drumbeat. At first it was faint, like thunder miles away. Then it grew louder, slow, steady, boom, boom, boom. Through the mist we saw lights, dozens of them, flickering like candle flames weaving between the trees. They moved in rhythm with the drums. Tyler whispered, "Dude, what the hell is that?" I didn't answer, because the shapes behind the lights were becoming clearer. They weren't people, not exactly. They wore masks, porcelain white with painted black mouths and hollow eyes. Their clothes were tattered, dripping wet like they'd just climbed out of a lake. Each carried a candle in one hand and something hanging from the other. Ropes, chains, bones. The air smelled of mud and decay, and then between two of them I saw something taller. A figure draped in black, its mask carved like a smiling face. But the smile was too wide. Every few steps it would tilt its head toward the sky as if listening to something only it could hear. The others followed behind in perfect silence, except for the rhythm of their bare feet against the soil. We crouched low behind a fence post, praying they wouldn't see us. But then Tyler's flashlight slipped from his hand and hit the ground with a sharp click. The drumming stopped. Every masked head turned toward us in perfect unison. My breath froze in my throat. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. Then the tall one raised its hand and pointed straight at us. We ran. Branches whipped our faces as we tore through the woods, hearts pounding louder than the drums. But no matter how fast we ran, the sound followed, closer, faster, like it was inside our heads. When we finally reached the road, I turned to look back. The field was empty, no lights, no drums, nothing but fog. Tyler didn't speak the whole way home. The next morning, he didn't come to school. By that afternoon, his mom was knocking on every door in the neighborhood. He was gone. Police found his bike near the field, chain snapped clean through. But no sign of him. The only thing they found was his flashlight, still on, lying in the dirt. And on the lens, a single muddy fingerprint. Too long to be human. I told the cops what we saw. They said it was probably a traumatic hallucination. They didn't look convinced, but one officer, an older man with tired eyes, pulled me aside before I left. "You keep your lights off on Halloween," he said. "And if you hear drums, don't look out your window." Then he walked away. For months I tried to forget, but Halloween came again and I couldn't sleep. Just after midnight I heard it, faint but unmistakable. Boom, boom, boom. Against my better judgment, I went to the window. Through the fog, across the road, they were marching again, dozens of them, and in the middle I saw a new mask, white. But the eyes were different, familiar. They were Tyler's. He looked right at my window, lifted his candle and smiled beneath the porcelain. I moved away from that town years ago, but every Halloween, wherever I go, I still hear those drums. They always start at midnight. Last year, I woke up to find muddy footprints leading from my front door to my bedroom window. And last night, someone left something on my porch, a mask, white porcelain, smiling too wide, still damp. Inside, a note written in dirt. "You were invited. Don't be late this year." Now, as I write this, it's 11:54 p.m. I can hear the drums again. Faint, but getting louder. The air smells like wet earth and candle wax. There's fog rolling under my door. I think this time, they're marching for me. When I was little, my grandmother used to warn me about the Ashmere house. She said it only appeared once a year, on Halloween night, and only to people who weren't afraid to look for it. "It's not haunted," she'd whisper. "It's hungry." I thought she was just trying to keep me from wandering off into the woods, but then one year I saw it, and I've never stopped seeing it since. I grew up in a small town where nothing exciting ever happened. Every Halloween, kids would trick-or-treat through the same quiet streets, passing the same houses. Except there was always one gap between 44 and 48 Hollow Creek Road, a stretch of empty field where no house had stood for as long as anyone could remember. But on Halloween night, sometimes, if you looked from just the right angle, you could see a house there, not clearly, more like a trick of the eye, a flicker in the fog, a shape in the dark. And if you blinked, it was gone. When I was 16, my friends and I dared each other to find it. We waited until midnight when the streets were empty and walked to that empty stretch of Hollow Creek. The fog was so thick it looked alive, curling around our legs like hands. Then, out of nowhere, it appeared. A 2-story house, gray wood, black windows, no lights. It looked ancient, like it had been there for 100 years. And yet, I could hear something inside, a low hum, almost like breathing. "Dude, it's a prank house," my friend Evan whispered, but his voice trembled. We approached slowly. The closer we got, the more real it looked. The air around it was cold, colder than the rest of the night, like standing next to an open freezer. I touched the fence. The wood felt slick and wet, as if it had just rained, though the ground was dry. Evan laughed nervously and reached for the front door. The second his hand touched the knob, the door opened, by itself. No wind, no sound, just a slow creak like the house was exhaling. The air inside was thick, musty and wrong. It smelled like damp soil and old meat. The walls pulsed faintly like there was something moving beneath them. Every few seconds we heard what sounded like footsteps upstairs. "Hello?" Evan called out. No answer, just another sound. A soft, rhythmic creaking like a rocking chair moving back and forth. I turned my flashlight toward the stairs. For a second I thought I saw someone. A tall, thin figure at the top, half hidden in shadow. Then the beam flickered and they were gone. We should have run, but curiosity is stronger than fear when you're 16 and stupid. We went upstairs. Each step groaned under our weight, the sound echoing down the hall. At the top there were 3 doors. The middle one was slightly open and light flickered from inside. Candlelight. Evan pushed the door open. There was no one inside, just a mirror, tall, framed in black wood. And in its reflection, the room was full of people. They were standing behind us, men, women, children, all dressed in old clothes, their faces gray and cracked like porcelain. Their eyes were hollow, and each of them was smiling. Evan turned around. Nothing. He looked back at the mirror. They were closer. He reached out to touch the glass. His hand sank in like water. I screamed, grabbed his arm, and pulled. But something was pulling back. I could feel it, cold and slimy, dragging him forward. He looked at me, eyes wide, and said one word before he vanished. "Run." The mirror rippled once and went still. I ran, down the stairs, out the door, across the field. When I finally turned around, the house was gone, just fog. I called the police. They searched for hours, no sign of Evan, no footprints, just one thing left in the grass. A single black doorknob slick with something that looked like blood. For years I tried to tell myself it wasn't real. But every Halloween I dream of that house, and every year the dream gets clearer. Last year I woke up with dirt under my fingernails and footprints on my carpet. And when I looked outside, I saw it again, at the end of my street. The same gray wood, the same black windows, the same open door. And in the upstairs window, someone was standing, tall, thin, wearing Evan's hoodie. I moved 3 towns over after that. No one here knows about Ashmere House. But tonight is Halloween again. It's 11:47 p.m., and there's fog rolling down my driveway. I just looked outside, and there it is, closer this time. The porch light is on, flickering faintly. Something is written on the door in what looks like mud. "Welcome home." I can hear footsteps on my porch now. Slow, careful. They stop right outside my door. Someone knocks once, twice. Then a voice whispers through the keyhole. "Evan says it's your turn." The knob turns. If you ever see a house where there shouldn't be one, gray wood, black windows, quiet as a grave, don't go near it. Don't look inside. Don't even blink. Because once you see it, it sees you too. And every Halloween night after that, it gets a little closer. I always hand out candy on Halloween, even after everything that happened. I tell myself it's normal. It's just kids in costumes laughing and running through the cold October air. That's what it used to be. Before the knocking started, last year was my first Halloween alone in the new house, a little 2-story place at the edge of town surrounded by woods. Quiet, cheap, and just far enough from neighbors that you could almost forget there was anyone else around. I'd only moved in that August, and I was still getting used to the sounds. The groan of the stairs, the creak of the old pipes, the way the trees scratched at the windows when the wind came from the east. It was peaceful, until that night. It was Halloween, a Tuesday. I'd gotten off work late, grabbed a frozen pizza, and decided to hand out candy anyway. I turned on the porch light, lit a candle, and put a bowl by the door. By 9 p.m., the neighborhood had gone quiet. No more kids, no more giggling down the road. Just wind, leaves, and that faint sound of a swing creaking somewhere out back. I was halfway through a slasher movie when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, heavy. Not the excited tapping of a child's hand. Something deliberate. I paused the movie and checked my phone. 9:47 p.m. Late for trick-or-treaters. But the porch light was still on, so maybe one last kid had gotten lost. When I opened the door, cold air rushed in, sharp enough to sting my skin. And there it was. A kid, maybe 8 years old, dressed in a faded white costume like a ghost. Just a bedsheet with holes for eyes, except the sheet wasn't bright or clean. It was grayish, stained and torn at the edges, like it had been buried and dug up again. "Hey there," I said, forcing a smile. "You're out kinda late, huh?" The kid didn't answer. Didn't move. Just stood there, the sheet fluttering slightly in the breeze. The eye holes were black. Too black. "You want some candy?" I asked. I held out the bowl. That's when I noticed its hand. It reached out from under the sheet, pale and long, the fingers wrong somehow. Too thin. Too many joints. It took one piece of candy, dropped it into its pillowcase, and then turned its head slowly toward the street. I followed its gaze. There was no one there, just empty road and trees swaying in the dark. "Where are your parents?" I asked. Nothing. It turned back to me, tilted its head, and said, in a voice that sounded too deep, too dry, "Do you remember me?" Every hair on my arm stood up. I laughed awkwardly. "I think you've got the wrong house, kid." The figure didn't respond. It just turned around and walked down the steps. Slow, deliberate steps, each one echoing on the wood like it weighed more than it should have. Then it stopped halfway down the driveway, turned and raised one long finger to its mouth. Shh. Then it was gone. I shut the door and locked it, tried to shake it off, told myself it was just some edgy teen playing a prank. But then I noticed something. The candy bowl, the one I'd been holding, had a single item missing, a small shiny red piece wrapped in waxy paper, the same kind my mom used to warn me about. I dumped the rest in the trash. Around 2 a.m. I woke up to a sound from downstairs. Soft, rhythmic. Knock, knock, knock. I froze in bed. It wasn't coming from the front door, it was coming from inside the house. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by my dresser and crept toward the stairs. Each step creaked, the sound way too loud in the stillness. The knocking stopped. Then, after a few seconds, knock, knock, knock. From the kitchen. The kitchen light flickered as I turned it on. Empty. I checked the back door. Locked. Checked the windows. Locked. Then I saw it. Small muddy footprints leading from the back door to the kitchen table. Atop the table was a single piece of candy, red wrapper. And beside it, written in the dust on the table, were 2 words. "You forgot." I moved out a week later. Didn't even pack most of my stuff. The new tenants lasted 6 months before leaving. They said their kids started talking to someone in the hallway at night, someone wearing a sheet. This year I moved states. Different house, different neighborhood. No decorations, no porch light. But just now, I heard it again. Knock, 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 3 times. Soft measured, familiar. I didn't answer, but when I looked through the peephole, I saw it standing there. Same small shape, same torn sheet, holding something in its pale hand. A single red piece of candy. And this time it spoke, its voice calm, almost gentle. "You remembered now." The next morning, my neighbor said she saw a child standing on my porch at midnight. When I asked if she saw where it went, she frowned. "What child?" she said. "I thought it was yours. Every Halloween since, I keep the lights off. No candy, no decorations, but still, every year at exactly 9:47 p.m., there's a knock. And no matter where I move, it always finds me. Because whatever's under that sheet, it isn't a trick-or-treater. And it never left after that first night. It's just waiting for me to open the door again." When I was in high school, I worked as a babysitter. I did it for extra cash. Easy money, right? A movie, some snacks, a sleeping kid, and a ride home. But the night I went to the last house on Birch Lane, everything changed. Birch Lane was a dead-end street on the edge of town, lined with old Victorian homes that had seen better days. You could almost smell the rot in the wood. Half the houses were empty, the others half lived in. The one I was called to that night, number 47, sat at the very end, swallowed by overgrown trees. It looked abandoned, the kind of place you'd cross the street to avoid. But Mrs. Whitaker, the woman who hired me, sounded normal over the phone. Polite, even sweet. She said her son, Daniel, was 6 and would be in bed by the time I got there. All I had to do was keep an eye on things until she got back around midnight. Simple enough. When I arrived, the house looked darker than it should have, even with the porch light on. The glass was fogged from the inside. I could hear the faint hum of an old refrigerator and something else, like a whisper just below the edge of hearing. Mrs. Whitaker answered the door wearing a black dress and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "Daniel's upstairs. Please don't wake him. I'll be back before midnight." She handed me a phone number on a scrap of paper, and her coat brushed my arm as she left, ice cold. The door shut behind her, and the whispering stopped. The house was freezing. I turned up the thermostat. It didn't respond. So I settled on the couch with my phone and a blanket, trying to ignore how the walls seemed to breathe with each gust of wind. Every clock in the house ticked a second too slow. At around 10 o'clock, the phone rang. Old-fashioned, rotary style. But I hadn't seen a phone like that anywhere. The voice on the line was quiet, distant, distorted. "Have you checked on the boy?" it said. I frowned. "Who is this?" "Check on him," it whispered again. "He's not sleeping anymore." Then the line went dead. My stomach turned cold. I told myself it was Mrs. Whitaker. Maybe a bad connection. So I went upstairs. The hallway smelled like damp wood and dust. The wallpaper was peeling and family portraits hung crooked on the walls. When I reached Daniel's room, I hesitated. The door was slightly open, light flickering from inside. A candle flame, maybe. I pushed the door gently. The room was empty, bed perfectly made, no sign of a child. Then I saw it, a set of small muddy footprints leading from the window to the closet door. They stopped right in front of it. "Daniel," I whispered. The closet door creaked open by itself. Darkness inside, too dark. Something moved. A whisper came from inside, childlike and hoarse. "He said you'd come." I stumbled back, heart pounding. The air smelled like wet soil and something burnt. Then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, on the stairs behind me. I turned around. A figure was standing at the top of the stairs, small, pale, wearing an old-fashioned nightgown. Its face was blurred somehow, like fog behind glass. "Daniel?" I said, voice trembling. It tilted its head. Then, in that same dry, broken whisper, it said, "She's still in the walls." Before I could react, it turned and ran. Straight into the shadows. I chased after it down the hallway, through the kitchen, toward the cellar door, left wide open. The whispering started again. Only this time it was coming from below. I should have left. Every instinct told me to. But something about that voice and the way it sounded like a plea kept me moving. The cellar smelled of mold and copper. Each step groaned beneath me. When I reached the bottom, I saw old furniture, broken toys, and a single wooden chair in the middle of the room. Tied to it was a photograph, yellowed with age. It was Mrs. Whitaker, and beside her a little boy, Daniel. But the date scribbled on the back made my blood run cold. October 31st, 1972. That's when the lights went out. Pitch black. I heard breathing. Close, too close. Then a whisper right beside my ear. "Don't let her out again." Something brushed my arm. Small fingers, icy cold. I ran, didn't look back. Burst through the front door and into the freezing night air. The house behind me seemed to exhale, the windows fogging over as if the place itself was alive. When Mrs. Whitaker called the next day, and from a number that didn't exist, she asked calmly, "Did he behave himself?" I hung up, but that night as I was unpacking my bag, something fell out of my jacket pocket. A small, faded photo. Mrs. Whitaker and the boy. But now there was a third figure standing behind them, wearing my clothes. My face blurred like fog behind glass. I quit babysitting after that. But sometimes when I drive past Birch Lane, I swear I see that house again, even though it burned down years ago, lights glowing in the windows. And once, just once, I saw a child in the doorway smiling with someone's shadow behind him. He waved and whispered, "She's out again."